Here we are at the amazing Starved Rock State Park in Illinois. It's truly one of the gems in the state park system in the state of Illinois. The canyon lands in the center north part of the state. It's an incredible place. We're walking today into the infamous and probably the gemstone of the entire state park system, the St. Louis Canyon today. St. Louis Canyon is famous for a lot of things. It's famous for its beauty, it's famous for its natural history. It's a fairly easy walk from the top of the bluffs. It's also very infamous, however, because in 1960, 50 years ago this last March, three very prominent women from Riverside, Illinois, came to the lodge, checked into the lodge, walked down the bluff. The bluff trail came right down here, about 1.5 miles, and then they walked right down these steps into the St. Louis Canyon. Once they got into the St. Louis Canyon, they were actually met at the very end of the canyon. They were assaulted, they were tied up, and they were beaten to death. And they were actually, their bodies were then actually put up into the holes that are up in the right side of the canyons, which we'll look at later. So this was one of the murders of the century, without a doubt. It really, really shook the foundations of Illinois from all the way from the top of the state to the bottom of the state. And the idea that these three women who were very prominent were a part of a very prominent society in Riverside, Illinois, made it all the more intriguing. So this is where the Starved Rock murders took place, and Bob and I are going to walk into the canyon now. So Bob and I have walked about 1/4 mile into this canyon. You can see how well the state actually preserves these trails. They've built some wooded plains. It's a very easy walk, as I mentioned. Now the ladies were walking in March, so you can imagine there was no foliage here. The runoff to the spring was just starting. Things were starting to thaw. Buds were starting to actually come up under the trees, but it was very isolated. They went on this walk, and they went on this walk from the top of the canyon, from the lodge, as I said, and they were all alone. They encountered nobody on their walk on that particular day, and often that is the case at that time of the year. You can see how gorgeous it is. We're going to snake now down into the rightful part of the canyon, and once we get to the right side of it where it starts to snake off, that's where things started to go wrong for the three ladies from Riverside. We're just about 200 to 500 feet from getting into the actual canyon itself, and the state actually built a series of 3 bridges here to actually crisscross the river as the river snakes around. And this is where the trouble began for the ladies. The alleged assaultant, his name is Chester Weiger. He's actually the second oldest inmate in the Illinois State Penitentiary system now. He was arrested for one of these murders. He was only charged with one of these murders, but obviously to the state's eye, he was the assailant and the murderer. He had a very good knowledge of this particular area and was able to do a lot of hunting and fishing with his father, and was able to come down through these canyons in many different ways where there are no trails. These trails, however, existed 50 years ago today, and these 3 bridges existed as well. So if you pan out here, you see the way it snakes around. You probably can't see this with a camera at this point, but at the very end of the riverbed there's the 3rd bridge, and that's where they believe that ladies ran into trouble with Chester Weiger. So the idea that, at least the way the state presented it, that being if Chester Weiger was the assailant, or no matter even who the assailant was, the idea was that the ladies probably crossed this 2nd bridge, walked down this trail and across the 3rd bridge into the canyon. And while they were there, they were spotted up above by whoever the assailant was. The assailant was clever enough to be able to come down here, and he actually met the ladies on their way back right here at this particular 2nd bridge. This is where actually a lot of the different paraphernalia from the ladies were found, even though the bodies were not found here. Over here in this particular area is where the camera strap from one of the ladies was found, and the bag as well. And then right over in back of there was where they found what they think is the alleged murder weapon, even though that has since disappeared, which was a rather large tree stump. So this is the end of the trailhead at St. Louis Canyon, and unfortunately for the 3 prominent women from Riverside, this is where their lives also ended. You can see that the canyon is absolutely gorgeous. Snaking down from St. Louis, they called it, and I think that that was actually named after Native Americans as well. Now, in this little hole over here to the right is where the assailant actually dragged the bodies. They were bound and found there, and it was 2 days after they'd actually been murdered that they were found here in the snow and the melting drift. So this is where the three bodies were actually dragged and laid up into here, into this dark cavern, which is a place of incredible beauty, but also a place where a heinous crime took place 50 years ago, March 14th, 1960. Ickle is here to do a CLE course, not so much based on the murders, but to discuss the murders and discuss the changes in the law since 1960 and changes to what happens in a lawyer's career and how a lawyer is actually delving into his career and what the differences between the media were at the time and the differences between the state laws and the state forensics as well. So we want to thank everybody who's been listening to this video, and come to an Ickle course. It's a great deal of fun.